All right, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. As a reminder, we will be doing a drawing for everybody that is on and is participating by means of having your video on. So if you are with us and able to use your video today, please do so. I will be keeping track of who is utilizing their video throughout the training and who isn't when we do the drawing. I have some training materials today that Rush will share that I will put in the chat, as well as the attendance information. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Russell.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jordan, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Today is we're looking at job development, job carving is the topic, training topic. We had a COP on a community practice on this topic. I think it was the last month's or June's. And so we talked a bit about what's job carving versus customized job, restructuring, job creation, just what does it all mean? I think a lot of us will often use terms that we think we understand, but if we were to like really have a more in-depth conversation about these topics, I think we'd find that sometimes we miss completely, we're on different wavelengths completely. Sometimes it may, I think a lot of times there's some nuance, some details that some of us may understand, or think we understand, or some assumptions we make and others don't. The example, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, I'm sure. It's just when if I say supported employment, I think I've found that depending on the definition of supported employment, there's a rehab definition you can look up, but what it actually means, in our brains and in the streets, and when people are providing that service is really all over the place, depending on what state you're in, which funding source you're using, which, I guess, what types of tools, technologies, or, in some worlds, interventions, quote unquote, you're using. So I find just like supported employment has a lot of different kind of definitions and meanings. I think carving is the same way for me. And so I'll just, last time we spent a little more time about what does it mean to you. And I think we're roughly all at the same place in terms of how we identify job carving. However, we do see that there's some trends and it's all over the United States. When people say job carving, they carved a job. You can almost anticipate what that job's going to look like. There's again, and I don't know everything. I'm wrong. Often, what I'm saying now may not apply to anybody on this call or on this Zoom, but there's stuff we see over and over again. That I think just trends out, so often, the example that I use during the community practice is that oftentimes, job carving to me is historically most likely meant doing silverware at an Applebee's, or an equivalent kind of corporate restaurants. To the extent where, I've met a number of providers that they're doing multiple services. They are actually teaching that skill, in the day program. It's part of their day programming. It's kind of filtered in, shredding, probably the most ubiquitous one now is kind of lobby at fast food joints, or maybe somebody just doing dishwashing. And so there's certain characteristics that I think are common when we in very limited hours, maybe 2-hour shifts tops, that I think we see over and over and over again. And even though carving, when we had our community practice, and it's in the Rehab Act, within supported employment, within the customized employment definition, I think all of us, what we really mean, I think our intent when we say job carving, it seems like when I talked to everybody, we mean highly individualized kind of jobs, jobs that fit the person. They're unique to the person, that there's something that's just for them. And I think that when I talk about customized employment, or we talk about economic development approaches, or job creation approaches, or job restructuring, approaches, I think there's where the fit is, but it just seems oftentimes that we're not building a lot. The other thing we see in carve jobs is sometimes they're just like they're openings that our organization, we have relationships with businesses, and we just will try people out, over and over again. And so I think when I've written down what you'll see when and those spots are held, but they're not necessarily, it's our organization's relationship with these businesses, not necessarily have anything to do with the person. So I think that when we look at the slides which you saw, which I think Jordan shared, and then there's some materials that I've shared. I think that that there's a point when an idea of job carving is really the same as restructuring, community integrated, competitive integrated employment, highly individualized, highly personalized approaches, which would kind of overlap with customized employment or IPS supported employment or other approaches or traditional support employment. But I think there's just in ideas, but I think there's something whenever in practice that things really kind of fall apart. And so we'll talk a bit about that today, just briefly at the start. And then today's going to be mainly like me talking at you. Really sorry about that. I just want to show you some stuff. What we do find is, and we've been guilty of it too, is that there's not a lot of structure, I think, for job development. There's not a lot of tools that we're using. There's just not a lot of, I think, intentful action. There doesn't seem to be a lot of, there seems to be a lot of like, we'll figure it out. That's the approach oftentimes. And so I just want to offer some suggestions. What I'm going to show you has mainly been formed around, again, highly individualized approaches like customized employment, but they don't have to be. I think all these approaches are follow the individual, flow from the individual, in the terms of, at least in the sense of, well, it's got to be a match. We've got to have a job that fits the person. Oftentimes, though, in conversations, when we're thinking about like, well, let's talk about what happened before, like previous to when we work with you now. And just when you follow the conversation back a lot, when we have conversations of, well, why did we think that would be a good match? Like when you tried that out, what were you thinking that was, that fit you? And oftentimes there's not a lot of evidence, for why we did what we did, besides the job was open, you wanted to work. And so that's a really haphazard way to go about rehabilitation, right? And funding systems generally, aren't just going to fund repeated over and over kind of experimentation kind of approaches. We call that, I told some people last week when I was there, the needle in the haystack approach. It can work every once in a while, mainly when it works. There's some relationships there. You get lucky there. But so what we're trying to, what we're going to talk about today is just kind of maybe some ways to make things happen, and to have them be based on some, I guess, evidence of why we think things would be a fit, and a process for verifying that fit. So, okay. So I will be me talking at you, so apologies for that. I don't, we're only going to go, I think, an hour and a half today. I don't even know if we'll need that, because today's not really designed tons for interaction. Although there's one question on PowerPoint where where I kind of ask you what else has worked for you. But at any time, I do want to just jump in if something's not making sense, or if you have questions, or if I'm making assumptions, or whatever. Just please do feel free, even though this isn't designed to have like a participatory kind of flavor today. I still would like you to jump in whenever you feel like, whether it's raising your hand or just start talking. That's cool. So. So let me share I'll share this PowerPoint here. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay, and you're gonna, some of the slides again, I think are kind of they fit in every single. I must use them in every single presentation. At least one of them, the inverted pyramid, because I think it's a great illustration of kind of what we're talking about. I do want to start with, just saying that in everything we say, right, there's a caveat. There's always an exception. So there are times in people's lives where trying things out is the norm, where just like, when you're repeated exposures to different jobs, and if they don't work out, it's not like this massive, or systems understand that, right? Funders understand that, supports understand that. And I think that most times, that when that happens is at certain periods of one's life, so typically, when people are adolescents and are young adults, where the expectation is that you don't know who you are yet, and that you're developing, you're figuring yourself out, you're growing, and so so it's fine, it's great if you get an after school job or a weekend job or a summer job. Then you may try some stuff out. It doesn't work out, no big deal. My daughter is just about to turn 17, and she's had like 4 jobs, in the last 6 months, and we're like, my wife and I are like, you're not going to quit this job, because you're a lifeguard. They have the skill, they want you, and she, I guess her manager, she doesn't like, and so we're just trying to teach her kind of like stick to it. You have some leverage, discovery, negotiation. But it's like, okay, cool. And systems should support that when people are learning about who they are and are young adults or adolescents. But there's a point when, okay, so that's cool. So we want to say that. And then there are other folks, who I think, who that kind of approach, not very structured, that people who can go out and get a job anytime. It's like, what happens next is the struggle, where you may have to do, some refinement, help people kind of figure out what's going on, but you may not have to take a massively kind of planful approach and like try to understand exactly where things are at. I think a lot of it comes to how much understanding do we have to know as professionals about a course of action, so that we can get some kind of anticipatory kind of stance towards a likelihood of the next thing that will happen, right? So we know, ultimately what I'm trying to say is like, do what works with people. If it works that people try things out and they last, 3 years and 4 years, they come back, I think our systems can probably adapt to that, and I like the measurement I like to use is the mean tenure of a wage employee. And last time I checked, it was a couple of years ago, it was 4.4 years. It's probably gone down since then. I need to look at that. But, if people are kind of near what the typical mean is, like right in the middle, 50% are in the job less, 50% and more. I think that if a nice yardstick is what's the typical thing for everybody. But there are folks who, will try things over and over again, and it just doesn't work out. And I think those are the people that will end up probably be written off, or, organization, like I told you before, we used to have the 3 strikes and you're out rule, can't benefit from services, whatever, all that stuff. So, so those are people I think we want to, look at kind of if we're thinking of job carving, how do we get there? What are the processes? And then there's other people, that I think a lot of times are people who maybe are looking at work for the first time, seriously, right? So Marcy, the example, and this is a I'm going to tell you about Marcy, but this is not her. This is something I took from offline. She's somebody who's like late 40s, early 50s. How do we help her? She's never worked, right? Nobody really knows her. Nothing that's expected of her in her life really is compatible with the work. We talked last week about interview during the community practice. It was about building communication skills, and one of the organizations had this cool curriculum, and they were talking about the five R's or the 5 domains. And the first one, I didn't ask what the other ones were because we didn't have tons of time and it was a cool conversation. But the first one I did recall, she said, was responsibility, And so I think it's interesting if we're trying to teach people like responsibility and interview skills, or how you interview well, if we're thinking about that with work. But then when they go back to their lives, there may be not much that's expected of them in terms of responsibilities, personal growth and development after a certain age, right? A certain point, right? The staff's opinion is, well, that's my job. Yeah, I do that stuff, or it's cleaning, cooking, whatever. So I think that there are going to be people that where that approach of like, let's figure it out, it's going to be really tough for people to understand because they don't know the person in that way. And what the tendency is that they'll fall back on stereotypes, on service kind of jargon and service approaches. And you're not going to get tons of chances, right? I mean, people may be written off, or not everybody, but just work's not been a big part of their life. And now you're at 45, you're saying that people should work, this employment first stuff. That's kind of weird. I've had parents say the same thing to me, and it's totally cool. Like parents are like, yeah, I mean, being involved in my son or daughter when they were, it's an easy ask. When they were an adolescence or early 20s, but you're asking me to be involved in my 55-year-old son's employment search. I mean, we haven't thought about employment in such a long time, and it's not as easy. This is a parent talking about her and then other parents. It doesn't make as much sense after 20 years to them be like, hey, work now. This last 20 years, remember, well, just forget about that. We've been doing other things, and need to pull them on board. So I just think, when we're talking about job carving and customized work, highly individualized, approaches, personalized approaches to work, there needs to be some kind of structured approach, right? Or you're going to fall back into some of the cliches. So with Marcy, and that had been what happened. I may have used her example in the customized training earlier, but these were the expectations. Marcy, she didn't have a parent, unfortunately. That was involved, and so her guardian was the state, the appointed guardian. And what we like to think is that you're going to probably fall back into these even if you're using what you think is an individualized approach, you're going to probably fall back into these categories, these predictable categories of carving, of the lot and lobby, or the dish pit, or the cleaning toilets, or whatever, shredding, utensils, the fork, rolling silverware. If you don't do it, think a bit about, because people will just go where you already have kind of pathways. And again, not saying that may work for some people, but it just doesn't have a tendency to work to what we would consider like at least even part-time hours of like 20 hours a week, and to grow and to go towards something. Or, I know this happens all over the place. If people end up in kind of where programs contract, with businesses, and they, run things that way, where they're working for the CRP that's then contracted with something in the community. So with Marcy, I mean, it was the same stuff, right? Like, I mean, she had been within the system for so long that like, it was just weird. She wanted more money, and that was a weird ask of her. It's like, why do you need more money? All your needs are met. She's at $850 SSDI a month. I mean, she wasn't starving, that's right, and she did have a roof over her head, like, awesome, but it was like hard to imagine, Marcy saying, I want more, and them saying, basically, you're lucky that you have what you have, because a lot of other people don't, right? And I think that's partially true, but Connie's, for her life, she wanted money so she could go yard sailing and take some vacations. It wasn't like, it wasn't a massive, she didn't necessarily want to become a millionaire or anything. And then again, we were spending massive amounts of money to support her, $144,000 a year waiver, about 22 grand of that was going to the day program. When you added everything up, it didn't work. She didn't particularly like the day program. I think a lot of people were frustrated there. There wasn't a lot going on there. And so whether they had contract work where they had to kind of pass it out, so that everybody got their time, or they didn't have contract work for a certain period of time. Or, people are just pretty bored. And so, people yell at me there was kind of another thing. And so, and it's the other people using the day program, and also the staff, she just, and again, and not blaming anybody, just it was an environment that didn't work for a lot of people. And then the other thing, and again, I may have shared this earlier, when we approached, like, what approach are you using? Because she did have employment on her IPE. I met her when we went into a day program. I was working with somebody else, and when you do that, people are like, hey, how you doing? And so she just, she knew that her friend was going out and doing discovery or doing, assessment, community-based assessment. And so she wanted to do that too. And so the reason I got involved was because I gave her my card and she just kept calling me all the time. And so I showed up I couldn't get them to call me back. I showed up at the management offices just asking what's going on. And they did have her with SES, and they were supposed to be doing some stuff. But when I inquired what was happening, there was no kind of paper documentation. We couldn't figure out. But when we finally talked to we couldn't tell how much time they were spending on it. That was hard to parse out, like what's really happening. And I think some of you, if you're managers, I think that's just something that we've always, and as somebody who's does job development, figuring out how are you actually spending your time? What are you actually doing? I think that, and it's not all like making contacts. There's other ways, as we've talked about before, to go about job development, not all cold calling. And we couldn't figure it out, but what we ended up doing, what the director of the employment programs told me personally, face-to-face was, and again, I shared this with you before, he started listing off all the fast food places, Burger King, McDonald's that were nearby, Hardee's, blah, 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 Wendy's. And he said, we went to all those places. And he said that they already have, but all those places already have an MR. That was in literal quotes. That was before they had changed, and that wasn't that long ago. They had changed, where we don't use that anymore. But that was the approach. Was he didn't spell it out for me, but I'm assuming they were doing kind of lobby stuff, and they weren't even really talking about Marcy. They were saying, "Do you have one of these?" And so, where she ended up was we created a job at a place that didn't have a payroll. They actually created payroll for her at a place. Long story short, she helped them with an inventory issue they were having, a technology issue that she assisted on, helped the business solve at a consignment store. I kind of figured out who she was, followed her places that made sense. And she had the opportunity to also start her own kind of consignment. It started with she liked yard sailing. That's something she did that was outside of programs with a staff that was cool. Led to maybe fashion or whatever. Kind of thinking of who else is interested. And the owners had kids that would show up. They would get bused there after school, and she really missed not being around her family. That she grew up around, had good memories of being around cousins and stuff like that, and nephews and nieces, and it was pretty cool all around. And church was an important thing too, to the family and to her. So there's all this stuff we found by just thinking about who Marcy was and how are we gonna, they don't have an MR, that approach. Don't quite understand that, and we couldn't really figure out. Okay, you were just basically approaching businesses and asking if they have one of those. So. Again, feel free to jump in. I know that it does seem like it's old school stuff, but that wasn't that long ago when I had that conversation with them. And so I just think sometimes what happens is, again, we're all good people. All of us, we interact with individuals really well. But I think when we start doing things on a broader scale, I think our skills kind of break down a little bit, and we don't have the tools. We're not quite sure what to do. And we do tend to fall back, on some of these kind of tried and true, we think, methods that we've seen have worked in the past to some extent. So, so when we're talking about customized carve, again, like all of this stuff, it is something I think we need to think about restructuring. I just think, even customized is a little weird. I just think people don't understand what that means. I just like, again, the idea of job creation. I think if we could somehow shift the conversation to this job is a new job, obviously it's for this person only. It's going to be built on probably on needs that exist already within your business, your employment, you as the employer. What customized employment and good supported employment, what they use is saying, well, there may be unmet needs, right? Maybe existing unmet needs or maybe new unmet needs. This person has a skill or buying tools or technology they could use to create a job. So I just think that a better way to think about all that, customized employment is again a funding, it's a methodology, but I just like job creation when you're making something that fits the person, right? So I think it's just something to think about. So I do think that there's no version carving customized employment or job creation or job restructuring that works, I guess, that works repeatedly or that works thoroughly. It's not built on who the person is, right? I mean, again, I think how you get there, that depends on what you're using, how you get to know the person. But ultimately, I mean, it's just logical that you know, there's a lot of bad matching happening. We had a I think that was the last session was on match. That ultimately, you know, that's what it means is that if a job's good for somebody, that means that it's got to fit who they are. And so I think just be careful whenever we're, you know, I think a lot of times with what's old school job carving, it's a need that drives the business drives us to figure out who we're working with, and we put somebody there or we direct somebody there. And I think we need to balance that. So I think it seems to work better most often when we start with the person. The other stuff about carved jobs that we talked about last time is, you know, I think in traditionally stuff that is labeled as job carving, you know, there's just not tons of complexity there. Not tons of tasks. You know, the environment, culture isn't thought of a lot. And hours aren't a lot. And so the worry would be that it's not a good match, that if there's any change, the job's pretty fragile. And a person has 2 tasks they're doing, or 1 task they're doing, or 3 tasks they're doing, 3 responsibilities. If market conditions change, you know, the person who's doing the least is most likely to be sayonara, see you later. So just something to think about. And then the other last 2 things are, you know, I just think that like most work is about a progress towards something, right? Just you know, it's the old joke about you know, relationships or employment work or discovery or job development. Your career, it's like a shark, you know, if it doesn't keep moving, it dies. And so I just think that there always should be kind of a thought of where is this leading, where is this heading, how does this help the person, you know, in their future career goals. Of course, the response often is, well, any work is better than no work, and that's true, of course. That something's better than nothing, but I think we want to have a bit bigger expectations, you know. That the lot and lobby job doesn't lead to the next lot and lobby job, you know, that there may be ways to pull in new tasks, new responsibilities so the person can grow, to give more options down the road. And then the other thing about carved, which is, you know, just, you know, the kind of the minimization of it, carving, you know, again, you cutting off the turkey, you get 1 or 2 pieces. I just think that Mike Callan had a great line about from Merkel and Associates is that, you know, it may leave businesses with a sense of loss, you know, instead of job creation, or this idea of we're trying to get to minimal number of tasks. You know, again, if you job carving, you have 12 tasks, you know, 25-hour a week job to start, plan on growing, great, like awesome. Nobody's gonna argue with that. But just there's something I think almost psychological, you know, about carving, reducing, reductive, lessening, diminishing. Maybe not true, but I think there was something we got to watch for. Okay, and then the last thing we talked about, you know, about how job development may be different if we're thinking about individualized jobs or created jobs, is that the goal is, you know, and I think it hopefully passed that a while ago, but I just think oftentimes in employment, like the goal is the offer. And so not such a focus on match or on longevity. I mean, of course it's there, but before we say yes, we're in Michigan right now, we're going through some individualized employment work. And so, you know, the method I'm going to show you results in kind of offers, you know, and it's happening now anyway, like offers of just, even, you know, more individualized offers, not hi, nice to meet you, warm body, let's hire you. But it's, you know, it's a challenge to work with. There's a staff that I'm driving after I'm done with this to Michigan, and got a job offer, and at a, you know, it's culinary theme, and so, but it you know, instead of saying yes, and because it's most likely to start smallish, you know, to be pretty limited in terms of the tasks to start. This person's just graduated high school, so again, it's not I think that she's a person in a different position in her life, or it's not expected. She finds like she's not necessarily even on a full-blown career path. She did some stuff in high school. Nothing was really on payroll. She thinks she has an idea where she wants to start, and we'll go from there, right? But still, you have the greatest amount of leverage at the beginning. And so teaching staff to, to not like jump at the offer, but to view a job offer as the beginning of a conversation, just to make sure, that what is being offered fits what the person wants. And I just think our expectations are typically so low that we just think any job offer, great, like that's so much more than what the person's had before. But I just think, if we do good individualized work, we should be in the position to know the person well enough to know how they can be an asset in certain ways, and to view that as the beginning of a conversation. Again, we're not saying no, of course, but we're saying thank you. Can we talk about what's entailed and really look at that? And for this person, she's done some stuff in high school, but she's not spending an extended amount of time, without a group of people, without like heavily, there's teachers' aides around. And we would just want to make sure that this fits for everybody. How do you have that conversation in a way that doesn't put off the business owner, because they're busy, they're hiring, business is booming now, and hiring needs are great. How do you dance around that in a way that's gracious, and shows gratitude, and you're not, isn't kind of stepping on toes, if that makes sense. Very, extremely thankful, right, that this stuff is working in terms of being able to get offers, but then pushing it a little bit further. So that's an interesting kind of thing that is a struggle. So it just falls, we're hiring great, then what? And I just think how you approach it, right? In this case, they are following the person that I just told you about. So the skills are lead you to the needs, and then you try to match the skills and needs. I think it can go both ways. The needs, there has to be however you identify the needs, whether it's the skill, the person would be the skills, the person leads you there, or, as you do networking, you get to know businesses and they let you know, hey, we have this needs, do you know anybody? That's natural, that's good, right? That there's still a process of not being like, try this person out, try this person out. And I know none of us are doing it that grossly, but just to ask you, what is the method, the process that you're using to not just kind of randomly try things out. And I was in, and this happens everywhere. Being in South Dakota last week, I heard a story that I hear everywhere, which is that, in the past, we have, not me personally, because I wasn't here, I'm in different, we have done things that businesses have not appreciated, Mainly, I think what it is a lot is just that a lot of it is matching, of course, or we're just not available in the past, nobody on this call, of course, but I think we have stories of that, where we talk to businesses again, they're like, yeah, we worked with y'all before, we tried that, it didn't work out. And, the person who had your position 10 years ago, we tried it, I couldn't get her on the phone or get him on the phone, or just didn't work out. And we didn't know how to fix it. So I just think that, as you start building relationships, and everybody knows this, and businesses start trusting you, it's just really important to not, to think about stuff like that in ways that you're going to make sure that there are matches there, right? And all of us will say, of course, we're going to do that. Of course, this seems like obvious stuff, but somehow people got off that in the past, right? And all of us know those stories. And I don't quite understand how people ended up there, because, this stuff we're talking about today is not new. I mean, this stuff has been around since the late 70s or 80s in terms of supported employment, individualized employment. Customized employment came around in like 2001. So I would just, it's a warning that I think all of us can say, we'd never do that, no way. But somehow people in our positions in the past also, I'm sure, thought that too, like, no way, we want to do good work. And somehow, I think a lot, it's just things get missed. Nobody wants to intentionally burn a business, and nobody's in this to do that or to have a good match, or bad match. But something happens. I think we have to have kind of guardrails in place to help us, just as reminders, of here's what we need. check this out. Again, for each person, the thoroughness, the amount of time you spend doing each part of it just would depend, you know, on how much attention, how well the person's know, and how well you can figure out what the match is, right? And we're still saying it's an individualized approach, but I just think there's a framework, not a checklist, but a framework, kind of a process that I think you can go through and make sure that, you know, that we're doing all the things we need to do. So the last one there is, you know your ABCs. That's just old school, you know, always be closing kind of sales stuff from Glenn Ross, which is a really cool movie on the horrors of old school sales stuff we want to stay away from. But I think a good reminder, you know, of why we need to make things about relationships, about people, tricking people. We're authentic. We believe in the people that we're representing, but we should be kind of pushing it forward. In the moment, and it's cool. Like, we may not have an option for closing now, in terms of closing meaning like the job match. That's perfect. That's fine. And so it's time to, you know, keep that relationship, ask for referrals, move on. Don't waste time. You know, move on to the next one. But keep that relationship, because you'll probably need them in the future. Again, are there any questions about that? We kind of covered this last week. I'm going to show you this again. I'm going to show you the tiers we use in job development for customized employment, which again, it fits any approach to individualized employment. Okay, so this.
Hey, I have a question really quick for the group. I'm trying to decide if it's just an issue on my end or if we have an issue overall. Is anybody else having a hard time hearing Russell periodically and seeing a delay in his video?
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to decide if it was on my end or not. So it's not bad, Russell, but just every once in a while, it's like there's just a delay a little bit.
Okay, there's a storm coming through. So it's been super humid here. We've had like 2 thunderstorms already. We had one like 7 in the morning. I'll slow down my talking. So, but yeah, let me know if you need me to say something over again.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Anything you want me to cover again?
I didn't hear anything that just completely got cut out, but just it gets a little goofy once in a while. But
sometimes it'll slow down and then it'll talk real quick to get me caught up. Like, that's weird. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Well, I have the floor for just a second. I'm going to announce the code word so I don't have to interrupt Russell again. The code word this time is wisdom. So, thanks, Russell. Sorry.
Yep. Thanks. Okay, so this is going to be familiar, and again, this is not nothing to do with. This is I think how the typical employment process works. And so I just think, you know, how we think it does, the HR process, the HR process. And I just think this is a wonderful, again, a reminder. I love this thing. It's like Zen Buddhism or meditation, or just hits you in the head. Like, anything that you're going to do this process, which is, you know, and the whole thing here, you guys have heard me talk about this. It's the 1 to 100, where there's a job posting, 100 people apply, then it takes you through each step. If you want to explain what individualized approaches are, I think you'd want to say, you know, it's going to be not this, or we're going to alter this in some fashion. So I use this as just a way to say, you know, if you find yourself in this process, it's likely that you know, carving a job is going to be very, very hard. At least, you know, anything that's a substantial job, you know, anything that's robust, you know, because essentially when you put in this flow, you're competing against all the other applicants. So that's tough. And as soon as you get kind of stuck in there in that process, you know, you kind of lose all your ability to influence the process, to alter the process. You lose all your power. So an alternative to that, and Jordan, I don't think we've shared this before with you, or may have. Again, this isn't necessarily for customized employment. It's pretty detailed because this is how a state is funding customized job development. Stop share here. You're going to see CE on it, but it flows. But when you're thinking about how job development works in general, I think hopefully you can see how um, one of the things I'm having fun doing. So I made my first trip out to one of the groups that we're doing CE, customized employment. One of the wonderful things is that we're in the first, now it's 7 months, starting our 8th month year of this bigger project, this competitive integrated employment project. And so it's fun because I love it because I get to have conversations with providers that I typically probably wouldn't ask a lot, because we're going more, well, I would probably ask, but I wouldn't have the standing to kind of follow up on and try to help, So what I love is that I'm going to be able to spend time with people, obviously anybody who's doing the CE part, but then whoever else that we can figure out to get involved in the priorities of the state and of providers, to look at, well, how are things working for you? What are the tools you're using? And again, I don't want to overstep my bounds. Don't want to do things that I'm not asked to do. But just an observation of mine is that, again, like in job development, there's not a lot of structure, and I think that's okay. Like there's nothing intuitively wrong with that, because I think job development is way more non-linear and more chaotic than any version of assessment. Even discovery, which I think a lot of people view as pretty chaotic, has an overall flow. And if you tell me you're in this part, I pretty much know what you're doing generally. CBAs, readiness stuff, and that, a lot of them, that's a curriculum where it's all spelled out. It's been pretty organized, pretty controlled. But in job development, as we move towards like the world outside of our services, that becomes more real, like the real world, unpredictable, surprising, chaotic, complex, contradictory, uncertain, not sure. And so I think that can be scary. And so I think it's super important, especially for those of us that are maybe, some of us are natural, like, hey, we can go out and think on our feet and really be creative. I still worry that if you don't know the person well, if you're not doing great tools to get to know the person, you can influence somebody, but it may not be, you still have to check yourself if you're good at that stuff to make sure you're doing the right thing. But some people are just naturally gifted at that. It's not a lot of people though, I don't think. It's a skill set. And I think most of us, like me, I don't like absolute chaos. I do not like feel like I'm completely out of control. And so what I found helps, just like with any learning or any complex projects, is to treat it kind of like a project management approach where we break things down into kind of assignable, accomplishable, not too overwhelming goals, work on the work there, and then move on and go from there. It's where I feel prepared, where one step leads to the next. So I don't feel overwhelmed. And so I'm not biting off more than I can chew, and then I can communicate what I'm doing with people that I need help from, so I can ask for help. So I think, one of the things so if we just think about, well, what's the format? And again, this is not just for customized. I mean, the process this is built because Michigan, this is how they're funding customized job development, this is the stages of it. But if you think about it, it's essentially, there's a meeting, there's a planning stage, right, of employment, right? And again, this is, don't worry about all the particulars, but it's essentially, if you look at activities, who's the team? What discovery recap consists of? What's the story, right? What's the meat that we're using what are we going to say to businesses, right? And again, whatever you're using for that, whether even if it's a traditional resume, how do you make that come alive, right? Anyways, what is it? What's the job? I mean, the basic level. What's the job goal? And how do you get beyond like the old school VR referral for like not customer service, like service industries? Or there was one in West Virginia where they would, I'd get a referral for a job goal of something wrong with service industry or something. I can't remember. But basically, it was like, just any job. This will fit any job. Just give them a job. And they're very flexible with whatever that job category was, which wasn't very. I liked the freedom of it, but still didn't really help. Help me. Yeah, it still had all this stuff to work through to find what we felt fit. So, what's full potential look like? What are our goals, right? And I think, what are your goals today? And make sure you're looking ahead. Like, what are your goals as we move forward? what are the well, obviously financial goals, benefits planning, that's important. There'll be anything. Job development tools, right? We had this discussion a bit through some of these trainings. Uh-oh. Jordan, I've got an unstable, can you hear me now? Okay, I got an unstable notice, so I'll try to watch for that. So, sorry. So, I don't know if you can hear it, but there are some rumbling. But what are the job development tools that we're using? Again, how do you show people what the person can do? And then disclosure. Where's the story lead? And then the products. And again, this is from the customized employment's perspective. But essentially, it's like, what's the platform for job development? What's the story? What are the tools? And then where are you headed? So how are you identifying? Like, what are the marketing materials? How are you going to describe the person? If you think it's kind of crass, but if you think of the person like something you're selling, or a product, again, I don't think not like that. It is kind of like that, but it's not. We gotta make sure we're not we're seeing the person for the whole person, but something like that. Where you're representing them, and then what are you going to do? And then as you get into it, this is essentially the process of contacting businesses. Now, again, if you're doing a needs first approach or a mixture needs and skills, like where we would be taking, if you're doing highly individualized supports, you typically would be doing a person first approach towards job development. Again, whether it's customized support deployment, like targeting businesses based on, it doesn't matter who's hiring necessarily. It matters where I think my skills, my experiences, my interests, the things I can do, my talents, on Twitter, there's the people complaining they have a PhD in something and they're working at call centers, and they're not happy about that. So that's what we'd say. That's not just because there's a job at a call center or just because there's a job, and I know the posting because everybody's hiring now, like the person would drive you to where that is, right? Obviously, in any job, you're going to get to needs. You have to. That's what the job's built around, the matching of those two. But you're approaching business based on skills. You can also, if you're doing it from the needs only, and you're skillful at matching or doing a combination of both. You're skillful at matching the needs with the person. Make sure you're not helping somebody get a job that doesn't fit them. Whatever it is, where you identify the businesses that you're gonna approach. But then, like, I'm just curious, and I didn't have this discussion last week with folks because it was just, hey, how you doing? Just wanting to know people. But as the time passes, like, I really want to learn what tools are they using? How are they tracking? Are they just using case notes approach, or is there a tool that they're using? And again, like Jordan, I should have asked you this before today, but is there something that you're asking specifically for job development reporting that I'll show you what we have in customized job development that kind of tracks, it gives you a format for talking to businesses, and then we'll move into job analysis and move into to teaching, where you're really looking at what the tasks are, but there's a format, there's a structure and the structure is built really just like all this stuff, it's all, it's trying to help us get to the information we need as a reminder not to forget things. So for instance, like when you're tracking business engagement activities, like, what's the referral, who's the referral from? How did you pick this business? Like, why did you choose this business? Again, in customized employment, we're using vocational, and Griffin Hammonds, we're using vocational themes. But one of the questions I just love, and there's not a lot of clear answers sometimes, like, why did you pick that business? Like, what about that person led you there? And oftentimes when you look through the tools people have, you can't really find anything written down, like as to why that decision was made. And again, it may work out, which is wonderful. I just think that oftentimes it falls back again on, well, they're hiring and we knew them. They worked with somebody in the past, and that's cool. If we're talking individualized approaches, hopefully there's something about the person. What was learned, again, informational interview or whatever contact you're making with people. And then if you're looking at, again, customized or carved jobs or created jobs, then there's this process, which we would generally call, and again, this is negotiations is not, customized employment doesn't own that term. It's all over in business, not typically known in in employment services, but this idea of some back and forth, right, between the business and the employment seeker or the prospect, I guess, that they're following up on a lead. So it starts with informal kind of conversations, and we'll talk about this. That how you're getting you're getting it beyond just the job as posted, or maybe they don't even have a need, they don't have a help wanted sign. Are you having a conversation with the business about their needs, and how the person that you're representing and can help the business meet those needs. So there's these informational interactions, just back and forth. Where are we learning about needs, problems, challenges, opportunities within the businesses, and then we're starting to get to actual, like the job's starting to form, or ideas of the job are starting to take shape. So like tasks and duties, equipment, tools that could be used, contributed and used. We're getting ideas of hours and pay, production requirements. Again, all that stuff. Like I was just telling you about where I'm going this week. So we know it's kind of, well, she's going to go in there on Friday at this time, and she's going to try out this shift or whatever. And I'm still struggling. I don't quite understand. Well, what else is involved? Hopefully it's not. Is this part of a large exploration? Is there? We really need to have a plan, right? So I'm viewing it hopefully as kind of a trying some things out, getting your hands dirty. There's some in Michigan, just like in South Dakota and other places, there's ways that she can get paid through the VR system to try some things out. There's also, I think the business is willing to put her on the payroll, right? But we gotta make sure the business understands that it's not, she wants to explore, she wants a substantial job, right? She wants to explore a lot of her options. She doesn't want to get stuck, doing just front end and just dish pit, whatever. We're not quite sure what that is yet. So a lot of these things, right, that we're trying to learn just haven't materialized yet. They're not firmed up. And so we need to figure that out before day one of the job, right? So before it's like, okay, she's going to start, put her on the schedule, blah, 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 training, orientation, all that stuff. Like we got to do some stuff to figure things out before then, so that we can help this person, the employment seeker, be in the strongest position she can be in by the time day one happens. Cool. And then there's proposals or formal negotiations, and that's essentially as we get this information. And again, most of this is informal. Most negotiations are super informal. And it's, again, the carve job perspective, you have these needs. We've noticed them. We'd like to write them down, because again, like it tends to just, the way the world typically works, oftentimes people may start at a decent number of hours and then it kind of limits over, like they go way over time. That's most often what happens, not that things get together, piece together and grow over time for whatever reason and support employment. So we want to make sure that we have a plan, that we're targeting, these tasks, that we're writing it down. And then at some point, again, most of this is back and forth. We may be writing stuff down on a job analysis record, negotiation tool, which I'll show you. But at some point there is a meeting of the minds, right? There is like, this is what we have, right? And this is our understanding of what we're going to do. We just want to make sure this meets your understanding of what this is going to, what her job is going to be. And again, whether it's written in a job analysis record, which I'll show you, could be written up, typed up, it could be written up in a one-page proposal, just summarizing what you've written in a job analysis record. It could be written up if you're unstable. Can you still hear me? Okay, sorry. It could be written in a employment agreement, which I'll show you kind of versions of, well, I'll show you two examples in the kind of a blank form of the job analysis record. Just so that we're doing some thinking about what it is. We're typically, unless you're doing a business-to-business arrangement, there's no contract involved, right? So we're not getting lawyers, it's still at will. But it is important to write things down so that so that everybody understands what the expectations are. Again, even when you write things down, it's never perfect, right? There may be misunderstandings, but if you can get things down and go over it a few times, again, everybody's busy. It's really our job, right? We're the brokers, we're the agents, we're the representatives. Our job is to organize this, to flow it through, to make it happen, and to make sure all parties, and it's not just the employment seeker in the business. It's going to be mom and dad, service providers, case managers, transportation systems, guardians if involved, or payee, a VR counselor. Obviously, the easiest negotiations with the business. I always say that because it's pretty straightforward. You don't have all the mixed the interests that are kind of conflicts of interest. But all these parties, we're going to have to explain what's going on if we want it to be a robust job. And then the last thing, after agreement to hire, but before day one, and again, kind of as you're working this out. And again, this is the customized employment approach, but all customized employment does is it levels its methodology, it puts it on top of what's it's the same flow of who are you, the person, get to know them, whatever methodology that is, contacting the business, securing the job, on the job training, and the follow along supports and fading. So I think whatever methodology you're using, again, even in placement, in the placement approach, all of these would, I think, are going to be, there's going to be an approach that, hey, okay, you've got the job, but what are we going to do before day one? Do you need me to connect with the business? Even if you're you're a silent partner, how would you like me to check in with you? Do you need any clothing? There's some stuff that needs to get handled. All customized employment, or even intense support employment, says, well, you're going to be more involved. You're going to be do what's needed, what's asked, and there's going to probably be a few things more involved than if you're doing placement. But there's still roughly the same questions, and the same considerations. It's just the kind of the powerfulness, in terms of the intensity and frequency of it just may be different. Right? I mean, again, I hope that makes sense. Like, we're talking about the same subject matter to make sure there's a good placement. It's just how, are we able to get the knowledge we need? What are the tools we use to get that knowledge? And then what's our involvement, from the employment seeker's perspective? Like, I kind of started, and I think I lost my train of thought, or maybe I got the bad signal. One of the things I want to do in the next 5 years that we're out there, and probably, and maybe some of my colleagues too, they'll be out there, but is I want to figure out, like, what tools are you using? There are, I don't know if Shahara's on this, but I think she wrote if you guys are talking to her, she wrote this, she just copied this article. I don't know if she's on, her colleagues are on here, but so one of the things I'm asking is, like, if you're doing carving, like, how do businesses know what a job carve is? We talked about this before, about enlisting business owners who, if you're talking about a specific way of getting a job, whether it's placement, support employment, traditional stuff, IPS, customized employment, job carving, job creation, self-employment, that for all these different approaches, it'd be, as you are having, and everybody's having successes. I went out and everybody's doing a lot. A lot of this asked of you right now, but right now you have successes. And one of the things I'm really excited about is, as time passes, to be able to spend time with y'all and figure out, like, well, how are you turning your work into, like, tools, into resources that can help you and your staff, like, make your job easier, essentially, right? And that's one of the things I love about enlisting business owners or employers involved, is essentially it's a laziness approach. I'm not as effective as the business owner. Like, why would I try to be? Maybe it just is too much hard work, or I think it's just smart, that no matter what I say, I won't have the credibility of a business owner. I'm not from that perspective. I cannot have the credibility. I cannot take that person's point of view and experiences. I will never be listened to. I'll never have that kind of clout. Same thing with parents, skeptical parents, skeptical VRC or a skeptical system, right? To enlist, like, the people been on, somehow, maybe not, they're not directly involved, but they seem to happen. They're at the periphery. but pulling them in. And so part of what I'm really excited about is like, what tools you're using, you know, both in like marketing, that kind of stuff, but also when you do job development, like how do you decide like what businesses you're going to go to, you know, and then how do you track the businesses you're going to, you know, how do you make sure you and your colleague aren't going to the same place 5 times, you know, what do you do with businesses where there's a possibility, you know, how do you, for a business maybe that wasn't so optimistic or wasn't so helpful, but how do you make a plan, you know, for maybe trying to approach them later, once you get the job offer, or once there's a possibility, what's the process you use to figure out what the job's going to be, right? And that's all in carving. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to learn the job? The staff, the employment seeker. How do you make sure that we're not going to be unnecessarily providing support or building dependency, right? Like there's a lot. How do you build a good fading plan? Awesome, Jill. So I would love to and I'm curious, like, what are the tools that you're using, you know, to so you'll see when I show you the job development staging record. In customized employment. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we use like you know, it's a list of, again, the stuff that we're teaching, there's nothing magical about it. It's just one method. But if we do the list of 20, then as we go to businesses, like people type up, you know, what, you know, when you approach a business, obviously if you couldn't get in there somehow, then we'll all brainstorm like you're doing, Jill, and in your department. But once somebody, and you know, try to figure out how to get in there. But once they get to it, then you know, reporting on what happened, what did the conversation, how to go. You know, one of the things we'll talk about is like you always, you know, never leave a place without a referral. I think I've said that to y'all a lot. Like you never ever want to leave a place without having at least one other place that person recommended. And generally, that's not too hard to do. But like, how do you share what you learned? You know, and so I think that, and how do you know you asked the right? How do you? And the one thing I did again as a manager when I was doing it, how do you know the staff asked the right questions? How can you support your staff to have the tools they need? So anyway, I want to show, this is Shahara's, you can't probably see it, but she wrote an interesting article, a cool article. Everyone is hiring, but are they hiring everyone? So it's kind of like an op-ed saying, you know, this whole thing about like everybody's hiring now, but her just raising the question, like, you know, are people with disabilities being, you know, if everybody's hiring, are they? I mean, it's a really, really snappy, I think a really insightful topic or lead there. You know, is the business looking to hire everyone? So that's what and then, you know, individual disabilities, and she talks about that. So I think that's like a wonderful like foray into to have that conversation. And then I just wonder how, you know, what's the next part of that conversation, right? Like, how do you keep that conversation going? So I just thought, you know, so I'm really excited to, as I spend more time with you all actually together, to be able to see what you're doing, you know, what the tools that we're actually using. So, okay, so I'm going to share real quick. Go back here. Sorry, sorry, I'm talk too much. Okay, so, and again, these are questions that are, if you think of an economic development perspective, you know, we want to have conversations that get beyond the are you hiring, right? So again, you get around the yes, no. You know, I just like great prompts are, I think, you know, would you consider, can you imagine, what would you think? There's a possibility that, you know, this person, you wouldn't say employment seeker, you'd say, use the person's name, you know, Sally or Jim, whatever, maybe I'll help with. You know, you talked about, you said this, you mentioned this before, you know, we're kind of leading in to asking about things that aren't just like hire, no hire. You know, we have more conversations about picking out those, again, if we're using carving as the framework, you're pulling out, you know, again, I like creation or restructuring, building, you know, you're doing something new for the person, right? So we can get to these needs, problems, challenges, opportunities. Again, like that's the kind of the catchphrase, you know, stuff like what's not getting done, right? We have our questions we'll look at next. Is there stuff that's not getting done? Again, the worry about that when you say not getting done is the worry is that it leads to the things that nobody wants to do. So that's, again, maybe one of the things we see in traditional job carving is that, the jobs that don't get done, if they're only the things that people don't want to do, employees, then we just got to think about, is that something that we want to support somebody to create a job out of only the tasks that nobody else there wants to do? It could be the case that they just don't have the right staff, right? They just don't enjoy those jobs. I think during the customized employment training, I showed you the example of in Canada, where everybody wanted to work in the hockey equipment, and the winter sports equipment and the skis and all this other stuff. And the guy that we were working with hated hockey, which is like sacrilege, like in Canada, and he really liked BMXing. And so everybody always wanted to, and the other stuff was, I don't know why people didn't like the bikes and the other stuff. They'd rather spend their time sharpening, and selling this stuff and talking about hockey and equipment. And so like that fit him, right? The thing that people didn't really want to do there was put together bikes or work on bikes, fix bikes, display, do all that kind of stuff. So that was like, okay, that wasn't, I think, that fit. But again, I think that's the cleaning and the toilets and that kind of stuff. I would just, we have to, when we're doing carving around that, just cleaning tasks, or, the muck in the stalls or picking up dog poop or whatever. I just think being in the dish pit only forever, right? We talked about that, like, wherever I go, it's just, that was my first introduction to a job at a restaurant. But you did not want to stay there very long in the dishes. It was a rough job. You often got sick because it was just wet and humid back there, and it's hard work. So it was like, their thing was that's where everybody started, because you got to start in the same place, or all that kind of team building and putting your dues. But it wasn't a job people just stayed and didn't move on to something else. So I just think we want to think about that. Problems, challenges, opportunities. And again, how are you helping the person answer those questions? And again, this is, I don't think, we talk about this a lot, and I think it's perfect for a customized employment approach. But again, it's a economic development, entrepreneurial approach to work, where we just don't really want to be only applicants anymore. And I love, he said, you're not an applicant. You're not only an applicant, you're not an applicant. We're somehow, viewing what we're doing, again, as economic development approaches. So, these are, when we ask people, when people are doing, interacting with businesses, we have a format that we say, and those of you that have been in discovery, you've seen this. And again, but this is not just about customized employment discovery. It's just there's topics that it seems elicits conversation points that elicits good information most often. And so, and they tend to be, the 7 we ask you to do, or, what are you most proud of? And again, if you're asking, it has to be somebody, some of these you'll adjust if you wouldn't necessarily, well, it just depends on who you're talking to. Typically it's like business owners or managers, people are really involved, have a lot to do with the businesses. What are you most proud of your business, of your employer, of what you do? Stuff, products or services you'd like to provide, but aren't, right? But can't right now, are the things that customers ask for. Stuff, customer requests that are unfulfilled, right? That have you ever, are the things that you've felt like you've left the customer wanting? Again, that's how you have the conversation. It's delicate. You don't want to come across as you're asking the person to tell you all the things they suck at, or so you got to figure that out. How are people trained? I think that's really, really important. How people are taught on the job. Reflect that back to, again, think about match. The question about X dollars. We were saying $15,000 right now. If you had that, what would you do with it? Again, it gets at tools, equipment, that kind of stuff. New products or services. This is another way to kind of ask a similar question. Excuse me. Impact of technology. I think I shared during one of the last ones that we're doing informational interviews, talking to businesses, and they're telling us that they're using social media a lot more and like doing TikTok. I'm really kind of locked into TikTok these days, doing like TikTok marketing campaigns. So that's media, that's marketing, advertising. But how else is this technology impacting the business? I think I shared last time, the potato chip company that they're small and they like to be small, but there are, there's some tools to chop up the potatoes, cut them up, and then to process them. It could help increase the productivity rate. And then the last one is, of course, referrals, where wherever you're talking to, you don't want to leave there without a referral to at least one other place. Who else do you talk to? Where else should we go? We're looking for this. This is what brought us to you. That's kind of the stuff we're looking for. Where else would you suggest we go? Can you introduce us to anybody else? So this is the part where I would like to ask, again, these are just what we found, gets people talking. So I'm just curious, like, do you all have, when you're talking to businesses, are there any go-to, again, not like a checklist question, that's not how these are what we tell people is, talk about whatever you want, use whatever, just have a good time with it, right? Just we want you to hit these topics, and it may not be like, okay, tell me what you're most proud of, just try to weave them into the conversation if you can. You may have to say, how typically people tell you about technology and about customer stuff and products or services, but you may have to kind of weave it in, or you may have to just ask the question point blank. So there's not meant to be necessarily like a checklist, but just topics we make sure we hit. Is there stuff when you're doing business outreach, or you're talking to businesses looking for opportunities? Are there questions that or topics that you bring up, you make sure that you bring up, or your staff bring up?
Russell, I think for me, so a lot of the communities that I work with are small towns, and being able to kind of learn about their business and what they do, and being able to have that conversation with saying, hey, would there be a need for this person within this business doing this type of task? And then kind of going from there and tailoring that conversation to that person's strengths, because not everyone is going to have the same strength, or there might be areas of need that a business didn't think about, and just kind of going with that.
So I lost, okay, I'll just follow up on that. So how do you, I guess how do you find out about the need? So it sounds like they may tell you about the need when you're talking to them, or it sounds like what you said is you may learn about a need in the general industry, and you may ask them, like,
Yep. Just like for me personally, from my past experiences that I've had, so I've worked in retail, I've worked in the hospitality industry, I've had a few different experiences. And so knowing, like, hey, when you're in a grocery store or when you're in a retail business, there's always a need to bring items to the front of the shelf, or to clean the shelves, or doing different things like that, or unboxing like packages when they come in. So doing those type of tasks and saying, hey, would this interest you to hire somebody that would be able to fit this description, so it would free up other people's times.
Cool. And so you're using when you say you've worked in those settings, do you mean as an employment services, right, or you personally?
No, personally just worked in those type of businesses over the years.
Cool. So you're using some of your own personal experience to speak.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And then as you have experiences and you're helping use that to create jobs, do you find that you're sometimes, I think you said it, but I apologize if did you say, well, in this business, this worked over here, they tried this, or somewhere like that? Or?
Sometimes I do, but
Okay.
not all the time, because not every business is going to have the same needs or different things like that. So I think it just kind of, feeling out the business, seeing like, hey, how much of a hiring need do they have, or how little of a hiring need do they have, and just kind of going off of that as well too.
Yeah, cool. Great, thank you, Adam. Cool. So Brenda, yeah, what can I assist you with, or assist them with? What their challenges are? Awesome. So you're having time to, you ever thought about? Awesome. Ever thought about? Great. And Jill, if you don't mind, how do you say that without like, without like being like, you're running your business bad? Yeah, I know you don't mean that, but how do you say that in a way that's tactful?
Well, like, like we've like been in businesses where like maybe they have a hard time, keeping certain things stocked, or like what we found, I guess companies call it, like recovering their inventory, where, like somebody picks something up off a shelf, like say, a spatula in the home goods store, and then they put it on a shelf over in the hardware department. And they have people that have to go around and pick all this stuff up and then put it back in, their proper spot or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
Cool.
so we've used that before. Have you ever thought about, having somebody come in to just help you keep all your inventory organized in the places that it's supposed to be?
Cool. And do you say, I do say, well, like I was shopping here personally, or is there any lead in like that, or like, you don't like, you know what I mean? Like, are they ever wonder
I
that?
guess, we usually, kind of go in and, scope a business out, and, then we usually come back. Like I said, we have weekly meetings, and then, we'll kind of talk about it amongst our department, what we saw.
Yeah.
And, then, if somebody's got maybe a better connection with that business, then that person will approach them to talk to them about, maybe helping them.
Cool. So you're thinking about, well, who's the right person then to follow if we saw a need, or
Who's got the best connection.
Great. Awesome. And then could I, thank you, Jill. And then I wanted to ask Brenda, could you talk about that just a little bit, like just how that goes when you act, like what can we assist you with our chat, like how do they, I guess I'm just wondering, how do they, like if you're walking in, they may be like, who are you, and or how's that conversation? I'm just curious how that conversation goes, if you don't mind.
I think
those are really great points.
I think it's because it's small town.
Oh yeah.
So they know who you are, like somebody else that said it's small town, and tell them where I'm working and what I can do and what can I assist you with.
Yeah.
Or what kind of employees are you in need of? Things like that. Cool. Just general questions. What was the other one that I put? I forgot.
That's okay.
Oh, what are your challenges right now? Probably the same as everybody.
Yeah.
Getting employees.
Yeah.
I know that employers are more lax now on some of the standards, like employees show up late. They're okay with it because they at least show up. They don't let them go for that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what's your biggest challenge? Getting employees? Can you get me somebody?
Yeah. And then that's the word. Yeah, we can get you. So that's the kind of thing that everybody's. People. It's such an unusual thing to struggle with. I think, in my experience, of now like the onus is on you to do ethical work.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you would, but just like the urge would be to like because this isn't gonna last forever. And I did one of my first jobs doing job coaching was in California. It was in the Bay Area around a similar boom. And there was a woman we were working with who they just would not fire her. Like she did all kinds of things that were definitely fireable. Not necessarily health and safety, but like definitely fireable. And like I kind of came in after a while, and just them kind of not having standards really harmed her. Like after they finally did get rid of her, eventually. And then like her it was hard, like those next couple of years, because she'd spent a lot of time there under different expectations. So yeah. Cool.
Well,
So how do you deal with that's a tough thing to deal with,
And
Sure.
sometimes just asking if they've heard about the programs that are out there. If you would take a chance and either on the job training or work experience, we have that available.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Brenda. Great, and then Heather, so you just, you said, so it was a gas station, sounds like, I mean, local, so you probably use them. And perhaps you weren't a stranger to the owner, or how would you know who the owner is? I don't know if you're around, Heather, would you mind just saying? Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a working relationship with the owners for a couple of years, even before they opened up the business. And so, she was on my radar for a while, and, we call it showing face. You frequent those businesses. And yeah, I just noticed she'd been extremely busy. And so I just made the comment, and she's like, actually, yes. And he's been employed there for a while, 4 days a week, and doing well.
Yeah, I like that. So you guys call it showing face?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great phrase. Did you guys make that up, or?
Maybe we stole it from somebody and don't know it.
Hey, the best. Nobody's original anymore, but you just take it and use it. That's awesome. So showing face meaning that you're familiar face, that they know you.
Yep. Cool. We invest in their company.
Yeah. Right. Even if there's not a win today, or we're just, who we are. We spend money. We're all part of the same kind of economic infrastructure. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Showing face. That's great. And that's the other thing that I love. These things are going to be great. Just having my last week, that everybody's doing something really well. I found every place I met is doing something where they're really doing it well. And everybody has places where they, they want to get better at it. And so, you're just saying, like, showing face, like using, that's a wonderful, again, something hopefully these trainings, these COPs, we can share about, like, it's just a wonderful phrase, I think, I think immediately know exactly what you're talking about, but knowing that is one thing, but then how you do it, that's where the skill is like, how do you support each other to make sure you're showing face? How do you hold each other accountable, not in a bad way, but just like a fun way of being known and participating. And Ashley, I mean, that's a great follow-up. I think I mentioned that one of the places I worked, we required people to join groups. It was like, we measured you on that. It was something that was a part of your annual, we called it a preview. But I just think, like, showing face is such a wonderful framing of it. And then it's like, and then showing people, Heather and Ashley and others, when you're successful. And again, small town, I know there's a lot of complexities, but how do you actually do that? How are you known? I just think that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Also within ABS, in the supported employment section anyways, a part of that is that we are affiliated with groups, local groups, and they're all kind of diverse. So then, you're able to reach out to different branches where you may not see them economically. So.
Yeah, cool. So that's awesome. And that is something, again, I think everybody, if we were able to, like, if it was like the Matrix and we were able to, like, plug into each other's minds, like, I think we would find all the answers to all our questions, or at least have great hints and tools and on things that people are doing that would answer questions that we have. And so that's just wonderful. Right, I want to show you real quick and then we'll be done. I'm never good with timing, so I thought we would be short, but we're running out of time. Just want to show you that what we're using for job development. And then we'll look at when we get to job site analysis, which is next, we'll look at kind of negotiation tool. But again, this is just, we look at a resource ownership agreement and stuff, proposal. Can't close this stuff here. Again, I'm just interested in what you're using for job development. And so, well, we, okay, this isn't moving. There we go. Okay, so when we start engaging businesses, like, we try to use a different, and this is customized employment, but again, it works for any, I think this can work for any approach you want. But we try to, you're always like, the previous place leads to the next. So you're always pulling something from the previous step into the next step. So what's common in this step and the next one is, well, the team. So you're listing the team members again. And then what you do, you're listing the first 5 businesses you're going to contact. Now, in customized job development, it's way more intensive. So if you're doing placement or a more like needs-oriented approach, looking for, businesses' needs, you could expand the number. It's 10 to 15. The placement, you can expand even further if you wanted to. It just would depend on what your expectations are for when you contact the business and how much information you're looking for that would be useful to the person. But when you're doing, again, carved stuff or highly individualized approaches, I'm sorry, this isn't the best the way it's in a PDF. It doesn't scroll. It goes page by page for some reason. But you're just listing the first 5 businesses, and then you go to those businesses. And it just prompts staff to think in this way. Well, who's the referral? Who's the contact information in their role there? So you're doing a bit of pre-planning. And then, we talked before last week about, doing a bit of research about the business you're approaching when we did interview skills. Definitely something you want to, if you contact them during discovery or whatever phase is prior, what's your information you have about that business. And then we just, again, these topics must cover revisit, but we tell, most proud of all the other stuff. And then we tell people, obviously, what else did you learn? And then we make people think about, is there something here? Can we have a further discussion, negotiation? Unmet business needs, resource ownership, business of the business, identify barriers and next steps. And then we have 5 of them. In customized employment, it's like 5 at a time. I think that's a manageable number. But when we're doing other versions, whether it's placement, support employment, more kind of not less. When you're working with a person that doesn't need as much individualization, you can decide on kind of how much you need. But we find that, again, one of the things I've struggled with most is like, what are people doing? Like, what tools do you have? And this is just meant to be that, just a tool, just a support. The point is not, this does record information, and this is what we're turning into funders in other states as the product. But it's a thinking tool. But the point isn't the form. It's just a tool reminder to say, hey, here, remember these questions. These are what will make your job easier. And then it immediately tells you to think about, what's there, because there's this timing issue too of when you see an opportunity, or you maybe don't push the close, and I don't mean like hard sale, but you find something but you don't pursue it, you wait too long, just other stuff's going on. And this format just is a tool that just makes you kind of think about the next step, so that we have that momentum. And then it just gives you, I think, again, but I'm curious what folks are using for support employment or placement to record the process. I do find there's not tons of tools, like kind of formatted tools that people are using during job development, which just makes our jobs harder, I think. Again, in my experience, but okay, cool. Well, it's so next. I did not put the next two COPs on this. So the next August 23rd, the training topic is job site analysis, which this flows into. And then this next community of practice is the 26th, job coaching, support fading. So they all kind of flow into each other. So, and I will be, I need to follow up with the group. I'm going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, the round 4, and then I will be emailing the round 1, round 2 folks this week. So apologies, I'm back on the road again. I'm having a bit of a hard time getting back in the groove. So my brain is trying to catch up. So I appreciate everybody's, and great information too. Good luck to whomever, Jordan, they will find out later if they're the lucky person, right?
Yes.
Cool.
The end of
like
next month, so I will.
Okay, cool. It's like the COVID lottery. My daughter got a $100 Visa card, but we've had $2 million winners in West Virginia for the COVID lottery. It's crazy. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.